Google really, it wasn't that big. I think there was 200 of us in Europe. We had raised from BGF. We had 18 months. It's this group of senior leaders that can make or break that business. The CEO or the founder will tell me like, well, there's tension between product and marketing, or there's tension between sales and marketing.
Scaling a company is never just about a great product or a killer growth strategy. It's also about how your leadership team works together. Too often, leaders unintentionally slow their companies down because they focus too much on their own function instead of thinking as a leadership team. Today, I'm speaking with Maya Moufarek, a fractional CMO, an investor, and a board member who's seen this challenge play out at every stage of business growth. She's worked in companies from Google to fast-growing startups and played a key role in turning Pharmacy to You into the UK's largest online pharmacy. And now she helps founders avoid the biggest growth mistakes as a fractional CMO and advisor. In this conversation, Maya shares the biggest mindset shift leaders need to scale successfully, how to align a leadership team to stop cross-functional friction, what she learned from Google, AMEX, and high-growth startups, and how she built a portfolio career across investing, board roles, and leadership. If you've ever struggled with decision-making bottlenecks, slow execution, or leadership misalignment, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. We'll start with Maya's leadership journey.
I mean, I definitely spent a bit of my career going back and forth between larger businesses and smaller businesses. When someone says Google today, they think of like this massive entity, but really it wasn't that big. I think there was 200 of us in Europe when I joined. So it very much felt small. There was more work than people. It was very well funded, obviously, but that doesn't change the dynamic of the business, I guess, overall. Pharmacy to You is an interesting journey. I'm a founding CMO of Pharmacy to You group, and then we were all consumer digital people, I guess, with no health background. And by turning around Chemist Direct and kind of looking around as what was happening in that vertical at that point, we identified the opportunity of, digitizing online repeat prescriptions, thanks to the NHS doing a bit of that technology work that allowed all pharmacies and GPs to be connected. And so that kind of set us on the motion of actually buying Pharmacy to You and unifying those two businesses. And the original Pharmacy to You was around since the 90s, helped the NHS develop the technology that connects the two. And it was really in stealth mode. I mean, they were generating cash, but somewhat in stealth mode, waiting for national adoption of that technology. And so we came in at exactly that time. That was the now what in our investment pitch deck, I guess, is that it was now a national play and completely ripe for complete kind of digital first, both on the front end customer side and not call me and register kind of setup, all the way to further enhancing the back end. And so that's what we set off to do. And that, that was the beginning of a 6+ year journey for me, and Pharmacy to You is now the third largest pharmacy in this country. So, very much a massive scale story, but we went obviously with a million of ups and downs in the process.
And that transition from, because you're going from, I guess you went from Google, which was growing, by the time when you joined, it was like when I joined, which was like 200-300 in the UK at least, and then it grew, and then you went to Not on the High Street, and then back to Amex, and then back to Pharmacy to You, right? Sort of that big to small sort of change. Did you find that challenge, that sort of step challenging? Like when you went into the smaller environment or into the startup environment, being like the leader, you've gone from being like, certainly a leader at Google and at Amex, but then suddenly you're the big fry at these smaller companies, or one of the big fries. Was that a challenge, especially even thinking about like going into pharmacy business, which is not, you weren't in healthcare, so you're sort of going into this place being a leader without the expertise in the business. Was that a challenge?
I think the larger organization, especially Amex, which is such a, 100 years plus type of business, and a very matrix organization, it's a lot of like, align, rediscuss, realign. Like, I don't think I've ever used the word align until I tried Amex, to be honest. So I guess learning about stakeholder management at a different level of stakeholder management than you would have in a smaller team. So I think I took that with me a lot. And I think that actually helped me when we at P2U or the wider P2U group, because to some extent it was a merger transformation story before it was a growth story. And so you have to take people on board. You inherit teams. You don't always get to hire from scratch. You have to align with people around you that are maybe not cut from the same cloth or the same experience, who have done things a certain way for a while and you're trying to transform. So that was really the difference, I think, there.
Did you find some of those relationships like there's because one of the things I found with working with any company really, but established companies, when I come in on the outside, is like I might have opinions, I might have views, I might be right. Often I believe I am. Otherwise, I would change my mind. But it often has turned out to be right. In many cases. However, there's this view and figuring out where to compromise my own approach on things and where to persuade and how to go about persuading and how to do things that is not just like, well, here's how we do it at Google, because that doesn't always go down well, especially in more established companies. But, did you find that at Pharmacy to you? Like, as in, like, there's these people who've been there for a while, they have a track record of success that has worked in this place.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk through some of those situations?
Yeah, and kind of the usual, like, what got us here will not get us there kind of approach. Yes, for sure. And I think that was definitely a stark learning process for me at the time, PTU. I think what was really helpful to me is that we had like a core group of management that was very clear on where we're going, what we'll take to win. And I would lean for a bit on Mark and Gary to kind of, where should I really speed up and where it's okay to slow down and kind of let this thing, take its own flight or leave some space for adjustment. I don't know that I knew that term back then, but the term that really resonates with me now as I look to that experience at the time is there's this concept of first team. And the concept of first teams goes back to, in the senior leadership team, you're here to make each other successful, right? And supporting your, for a CMO, your CPO or your sales lead or something like that is kind of the primary focus of that team. This is the first team, and we need to make each other successful as a priority versus the people who report to you or that functional entity that you had. It's this group of senior leaders that can make or break that business, and then it's their role to manage their teams and other things like that. And another thing that I definitely was always a big proponent of is partially to allowing for first teams, you need corporate must-win battles. And this is not, we need to kind of quadruple our revenue, right? This is not, this is the outcome of doing it right?
Right.
And so how can you align that senior leadership team around not just this is the marketing plan and this is the tech roadmap or whatever, but into single must-win battles. So even if one of them, go on.
Did you have one that was a specific one that you remember, like as a particularly dramatic or an occasion that caused the team to gel?
Yeah. So so if one of the ambitions of the business is to be kind of the best digital online pharmacy, right? Well, that obviously means that your backend needs to work right, but it also means that you need a wonderful front end, and you can't be, the best online pharmacy if you have no users, right? And so suddenly it has connected so many different aspects of the business, and we're now all working together on this one battle and all contributing our piece to it. And so it's no longer a marketing plan or a front-end digital plan. It's a single plan that has all of those different teams contributing in that way. And all along the way, we can challenge each other and check each other, say, would that make us the best online pharmacy or not? Right. Or is that the first step in the direction of one day being the best online pharmacy by whatever the metrics might be here, right? But this is the way you kind of, so they talk, it's another way to create a cross-functional plan, I guess. It still takes a few reiterations of finding that balance. And it's just a very different skill set as well. I think, as far as I understand it, I'm no expert, but an amazing backend developer is not exactly your agile front-end experimentation, developer. So and that's where I think our solution over time has been to just introduce the right in-between talents to allow for all of that. And
what's an in-between? What do you mean by an in-between talent? Like, is this
proper product organization, UX designer, all of that. And actually the way that we divided it at Pharmacy to You was very much that I guess I had a chief customer officer role to some extent, because the full funnel of the customer interactions will sit with me. So I can actually experiment the front end and develop it in the way needed. And so front end product and UX and all of that would sit within my work. And then we would partner with technology, because obviously, the back end technology and the, scalability and reliability of a platform that deals with people's medicines is super important. This is not about like, oh, I can't order socks today. No big
Yeah.
deal. So obviously it is an essential part of that organization, and there's plenty to do and maintain there. And I advocate that with my clients today too. If you develop a marketing team whose job is just to like bring the traffic to the website, the rest is product, well, it's really hard to then really use the right levers at the right time. Should you fix the engine a little bit? Do you have a conversion problem? Does the
Right.
product need reiterating? Or do you just need more fuel or more quality fuel into that engine? And you really need to be able to act on the full funnel at the right time, with, a customer organization, I guess.
Yeah. This sounds like quite a broad-minded or broad approach to marketing. Like a lot of marketing, there's a traditional sort of marketing of, like, as you say, bringing the traffic, bringing the leads in, and having marketing MQLs and just based on that one metric. Was there a point at which you sort of learned that, like that sort of transitioning from being a pure marketing based on marketing metrics to having a broader view of the business in your career?
I think the reality of it is that the principle of like a growth manager or growth marketer started emerging in Silicon Valley and other places. And it was clear, obviously, started at Facebook as this team that really wanted to increase retention and other things, and was given the scope to do that in the full funnel. I mean, there's two aspects, right? If you work really closely with your CFO, the CFO will be like, well, I'm spending that much in marketing. What does it give me in hard cash at the other end? Right. So that's the reality of a very commercial startup organization that wants to be profitable over time, even if they're not right now, for whatever reason. And so if you want to connect those full dots, then someone needs to be able to oversee all of that. And obviously, being within the founding team of this new organization, it is quite natural that, someone at the seat will have that role. That's kind of one way that starts going in that direction. And I've seen a lot of very quality CFOs advocating, to be honest, for that on behalf of the CMOs, because how would you like to own something if that's not the case like that? The other aspect of that is, well, it's one customer and it's one journey, right? So if you're an online business and it's a, digital experience throughout, well, you drove a specific type of traffic, you converted it on what some would call a marketing website up to this, like, register now or start now or like, add to basket, whatever that experience might be. And then suddenly you're like, oh, that's product now, right? Like now you're going into the logged in experience, and therefore that's the product or the app or whatever people call it. And then you're like, okay, well, or you're so small that your front-end product manager, whatever, growth product manager, and your marketing team are so aligned in their way of thinking and approach that it's just a divide and conquer, and they can self-organize, and that's wonderful. But in our case, we didn't even have a product organization. So it was natural that it was me stepping in that space, because really the first job after we raised from BGF and merged the businesses was to create the front-end digital experience. And the app and the front end. And so that kind of became its own thing. But yes, I 100% kind of invite people to really consider that full funnel and there's no one answer for each business, but somehow it needs to be reported in one go, analyzed in one go, and then different people and different skills might act on it at different places, but you need to think of it holistically and prioritize your activities.
Yeah, this sort of relates back to the one team concept, rather, first team concept, because then you've got your head of marketing, yourself, and your head of technology, and I presume there are other people running different parts of the business, whether it's commercial or operations or partnerships or whatever it was. And then if everyone's actually focused on the company and the company, what did you call it before? The company, the must-win company thing, which is like, let's make this sort of business of the winning online pharmacy, best online pharmacy. Then it's like, okay, we have to kind of arrange together. And often I've seen a lot of my clients where there's especially people with highly functional backgrounds, like as in they've come from tech or they've come from finance or whatever they've come from, being very focused on, like, finding it hard to make that transition from, like, I have particular examples of tech leaders or product leaders who sort of don't quite realize that they're part of that one team. Have you been in situations like that with maybe with your own clients or people you've coached or people you worked with or something like that, where you see that happening and being able to help people work through that? I mean, this is very sort of, if
Yeah.
not, we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite unfortunate actually the number of startups I see that have already siloed themselves out to some extent,
Yeah,
right? And so marketing's here, tech is there, product is there, and then like there's no comms whatsoever and no single plan, right? So unfortunately see it more often than I hope to see.
mm,
I do think that the first signals of that happening is that, the CEO or the founder will tell me like, oh, there's tension between product and marketing, or there's tension between sales and marketing. I'm like, well, tension from what? Aren't you guys all going in the same direction, or have you not agreed on the direction, right? So that for me is the beginning of that. Okay, some red flags here already. What is the reason for that? Let's get the elephant out of the room immediately. Is like, in some cases, just some people are not collaborators and they're very kind of self-centered in their function. And that's fine, but it most probably is not the place. It's the place for them, maybe much bigger organization where the lane is
yeah,
clear, deliver that, the rest is taken care of, kind of thing. But it's not the case in startups. It's not possible. Like, it just doesn't work that way.
yeah,
So there's also an understanding of fit and type of people that got hired into the business, and do they want to evolve with the business or adjust to the environment they're in or not. And then, but assuming that you can develop a single plan that is not everyone has their own functional plans. And I'm not saying that functional plans are not important. Like, tech will have a bunch of tech debt. It will tell you, I need to replatform because you're on this thing that is 100 years old and any day it will break or it will never
yeah,
sustain the next whatever technology revolution or requirements, right? A bit like your iPhone is way too old to download WhatsApp again, kind of version of it,
yeah,
right? And so they obviously, all departments will have their like infrastructure, foundational, need to be on top of my game needs. But then everything else is actually just working towards what the corporate plan is and what we believe will needs to be delivered to win, right? At whatever game we're
yeah,
playing. So that's for me are the beginning of those things. And then I always say, you know what, you're not going to transform your organization overnight, but like if it's product and marketing first, well, align product and marketing, right? What's the go to
right,
market? Who are the customers? What's the insight? What do we know to be true? And one particular client actually that I can think of right now, I was actually very proud of us that day. We did a lot of work within the marketing team, customer insights, really getting in the shoes of the customer, really understanding what was happening. They were developing a product-led growth engine, and I took on with the PMM in the organization to kind of do our own homework for the marketing team, very much knowing that we were doing the homework for the organization, to be honest, because product would need some of those insights because there are so many things that are just foundational to product-led across an organization. And having done all of that, we then invited the product organization to come and do a day workshop with us. The fact that they even accepted our invitation to do that, I was like, okay, we're going to need to really nail this and make this so good. By the end of that day, not only we were sharing a bunch of insights, they were like, oh, really? That's so cool. How do you know that? Like, they were really engaged, but by the end of it, there was one plan. So if
right,
we agree this is true, and obviously marketing has just two steps ahead of us because they're like thought it through and they think this what needs to happen with marketing. But immediately connecting back, well, I can do this only if you do that, right? Or I can do this, but only so well. If you also did that, that would be really awesome. And so you end up
yeah,
with one. And then you can incubate that collaboration in this one part of the business. And then it will slowly, because then you're showing what good looks like, even if it's just
yeah.
in those two teams partnering. And then, kind of small fire spread. So that's the kind of beginning of it. This exact client that I'm thinking of, what was interesting is they had like a research team and a UX research team. Like, they actually were arguably on paper research heavy, but
Right.
their insights, but as a true, I'm focused on product organization, they were doing UX research basically. They were like, oh, do you understand this? If I, presenting different way of presenting pricing
Oh,
somewhere or like things like that. And that's great, but it's wonderful as long as you've done all the rest as well, right? And so they were
yeah,
almost in such a important detail, but then suddenly we managed to extrapolate them out of this and saying this is super important. But before we even decide the way we present our pricing or the way we, position something or something like that, if we really understand the mindset of the audience and the challenges or outcomes that they're after, the challenges they have or the outcomes they're after, we might have a completely different set of approaches, even in the way we suggest the way the UI should work or what options we present for testing. And so that was an interesting path where customer insight means so many different things to so many different people, and you actually need a full set of them.
Did you have a specific, like this is an example of because there's this people are looking for a price, but then what they're really looking for is a total cost of ownership or a monthly price.
Yeah,
or was that the kind of thing that we're talking about here?
Yeah, no, exactly. And there's really understanding what decisions they're taking, what are the compromises they're ready to go for, like things like that. And then eventually there's obviously inertia, doing nothing about it. And I always invite people to consider their own lives, and there'll be a whole bunch of things that are not perfect in our lives, yet we choose to not do, choose or not choose, but we don't do anything about it whatsoever. And that's inertia. And really understanding what's stopping people from taking action. And then understanding their anxieties, like what is so hard in this change? If we were to present you with a great option, why would you not? Will I get fired? Will it work with my incumbents? Is the transition difficult? Will my team use it?
Do you find with those situations where there's some insight that's clearly valuable like that, is there resistance in the organization to accepting that sometimes? Like, have you come across that? Or is it just like when people see that, there's sort of a moment of realization and everyone jumps to the same page?
If you ask them, if you a number of organizations I've come into and I'm like, okay, what do you know about your customers? Share what you have or tell me about it. How well do you feel you know your customers? Everyone's like, we talk to them, we sell to them, we're great,
We know them, yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, great. Well, here's a 4 forces framework. Give me at least 5 bullet points for all those 4 forces, right? Struggles, desired outcome, inertia, and anxiety. And they blank. They might give me a few struggles, very high level, very high level struggles. Maybe some kind of like, I want it cheaper and faster. Great, that's not a desired outcome. Like all of us want it to be cheaper and faster. Like this is way too high level.
That's not unique.
Or they want to make more money, right? And I'm like, no, like that's all of us are in this bucket forever for everything. That's not an actual insight for your business. And so once I get down, I'm like, okay, is that really everything you know? Would you like to add anything else? No, that's what we know. Okay, well, let me show you what a great piece looks like for another business, just so you get a sense of the quality of insights. And then basically we go into the customer interviews and all of that, and then bring the actual insights. And they're like, oh, wow, I had no idea.
Is that to me like, if only we knew those things, then we would be able to do something different. And now we really know.
They would do something different. They would not be stuck, because often also there's that space of like, we tried things, it's not working, I'm not sure what to do next. Like, well, go back to your customers, right? Go back to your prospects. Like, what is it that we're missing? So yes, I do think that a lot of people overestimate how well they know their customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. Which is, I mean, this might be an interesting way of transitioning back to a question I wanted to ask you about your PharmacyTU experience. You mentioned in our prep that PharmacyTU almost died a couple of times while you were there. I'm presuming it wasn't your fault, but I mean,
well, all of our faults.
Maybe it's everyone's fault. But I mean, in a sense, I'd love to talk about like what can you talk us through one of those situations? Like what happens and how do you know that that's happening and what do you do and how does that feel to you?
I mean, the reality of it is just run rate, right? It's our ability to get an extension because we're running out of cash or having raised enough or, changes in legislation sometimes that might be, really harming to the business. I mean, the reality of it is, be clear on how much you're going to need to raise and for what, and then make sure that your team is aligned and delivering towards that, right? That's really the essence of it. But that's kind of how we've been balancing.
Yeah. So this is like a regular sort of like running out of. Was it when you look back at it? Do you think there was like mistakes made, or was it just like we're doing the best we can in the situation?
Yeah, I mean, if you remember, we did about, I would say, 2 transformations before we started scaling, right? So we had to like reset Chemist Direct. We then had to build a case to merging 2 businesses and convincing another board that, giving us the reins was a good idea. And at each of those stages, you sometimes need a little more money. And so I know that by the time we had raised from BGF, we had 18 months.
Mhm.
to prove that this merger is a success, that we have a digital front end and a clear unit economics for acquisition and a playbook for that. And we had 18 months to do that. And so, we talk about that with Mark and Gary sometimes these days, but like Pharmacy to You, we should have changed the name. But we're like, how many things can you change in one go, right? We would have
Yeah.
ideally wanted to merge the backends and the technology of ChemT and Pharmacy to You, because obviously you could, cross-sell to over-the-counter drugs with your prescriptions. We weren't doing that because we all, there was only so much time ahead of us where we had to prove our model. And so we had to take some harsh decisions. So by the point we had raised from BGF, then it's never smooth sailing, but, we were on track
Yeah.
and we were extremely focused. But before that, part of it, maybe you're right. Maybe, we were not pharmacists. We were not from the health industry, but really we weren't hired for that. We had wonderful pharmacists surrounding us and
Mm.
other that would guide us and help us. We were there because of our consumer and digital experience. And that's what we were bringing. And that's how we were, elevating, disrupting, use whatever word you like,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that industry that was left untouched.
Yeah, for sure. I guess along the way there's some investors or some people who've been there a while, or some pharmacists who are like doubting this
For sure.
situation and so on, really
Yeah.
trying to move on with that.
Yeah.
And
Well, managing your board, of course, 100%.
speaking of managing the board, it's interesting because you've kind of gone from one side of the table to the other side and back again and around, and advising people on both sides and all that sort of stuff. And I know when I was going from individual contributor to manager and then manager of managers and so on, you sort of see these situations on what I did badly at the lower level below and what I would have liked to have said to myself, and some of the challenges I'd like to get to people. I see people doing the same mistakes and things like that. And my own enthusiasm for particular changes, right? Things like that. Now, maybe that's just me, but but yeah, it was really interesting. And knowing what I know now, I might have done things differently back then, right? Did you find that when as you go from one side to the other, do you learn things that you sort of able to apply to yourself to change how you act on the other
Sure.
side again?
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting in my mix of work today is that I'm a board member, I'm an angel investor, and I'm still very much an operator, right? And do a lot of fractional work. And so, and I really enjoy that mix because it's really looking into the tech ecosystem through those three lenses, which are the most, as far as I would say at least, are the three most important in the ecosystem, right? Like, you're going to need the board, you're going to need investors, you're going to need the people who are actually going to deliver the change. And so, what I've seen over the time, especially as I grew in my career and things like that, it's all about really understanding the lens through which someone is looking at the business, right? Because an investor is looking through a business through a very different lens, a different time scale, a different set of metrics than an operator, than the founder, than, a non-investor board member would look at it. And so I think that's where I really leaned into my marketing skill, which is like, what's the audience? What's important to them? How do you deliver that to them? And really learning from that. I know at Google, I had some wonderful managers and guides, and then there was so much great work and great examples of communication around you that you could kind of steal and borrow from someone else's template of how they communicated something and apply to yourself. So I feel that's where I first started, like properly communicating. I know once a manager told me the result of a great email communication. I mean, that was pre-Slack days. Gosh, we're old, Richard. But like, you had to like send an email announcement or an email update about a project or something like that. And one framework, one way of looking at it to assess how successful you were in your communication, a manager of mine told me, like, if you get no clarification questions back and only like congrats or like, oh, that sounded hard, can't wait for the next update, see what pounds out next, or something like that. But you would be like, wait, what do you mean? And how about this? And how about that? And you get all those kind of answers back. That was kind of your judgment. Like if you get no questions back, your communication was successful. So for your audience, for what was needed at that time, you gave them what they needed.
Right.
And so I thought that's an interesting way of considering that, of saying like, well, if I just send that, or if I say it this way, or I organize it this way, will they understand it? Will that raise a whole bunch of questions? So if I say,
Yeah.
CPA increased by whatever, 30%, Well, the first thing's about, but why? Like, you're not telling me why, right? I mean, maybe no one will ask you, but sometimes they do ask you why also when it goes the right way, right? And CP
Yeah,
is
yeah,
sure. But it's just constantly being like, what would be the natural next question if I stopped my sentence here or if I didn't include that part? And so I think that is some of the stuff that I learned along the way. But it's board investor founders, very different style of communication and what is important to.
yeah. If you were knowing what you know now, able to sit down with Maya from early days, first interaction with the board, is there anything you would advise yourself?
It's really understanding, for example, at the board that it's all about, governance, risk management, right? Like speed of delivery in some cases, and really highlighting those aspects. So what are the risks of this plan? How are we mitigating them? Have we done all our due diligence to make sure that this is the best path for this business and why? Really
Yeah, yeah,
presenting them like that as opposed to like, we're going to conquer the world and here's our 100-country expansion in the next 5 years and this is how we're going to go about it. They're less interested in the how, but in the is this the right thing and is it the right path and have we done all
yeah.
the due diligence around risk and other things?
Yeah, sometimes those questions can go too deep into the how, and it gets very frustrating. Sometimes they feel like you're being questioned and
Mm.
interrogated, and sometimes they're like, or this is at least in my experience. And sometimes you sort of think, well, you're not even asking questions about this. Are you interested? Is it valuable? Do you ever have those uncertainties of like when people are asking you questions about stuff, or like, is this something that are you doubting me or doubting my plan, or is there sort of like insecurities about this that come out?
I mean, I think, yeah, I think you're right. You need to always understand where they're coming from. So I think it's always
Yeah,
fair to ask a question back of saying, I hear you. Can you give me more context on your question? Do you feel that this is not a well thought through plan enough and we should do more homework? Or do you have a personal experience that has kind of left you some scars and you want to make sure that we're not going to be in this situation? And so it's often about just context setting because it's really easy to misinterpret where the question is coming
right.
from. And I think we can become defensive or, feel questions, as you say. I think it's sometimes clarifying the context that leads to that specific question. Is
Yeah.
that what you're asking? Or, yeah, is there something else? Yeah.
That requires quite a bit of courage and a bit of self-confidence, do you think?
Listen, I think that's very fair. And I think in my current roles now, because I'm fractional, because, you're to some extent external as much as I embed myself with my clients as deep as I can, but you end up in a place where, you're coming as a peer, right? As someone that they want around the table, that they choose to have around the table, that they can no longer have around the table tomorrow if they chose. Like, there's this level, or like maybe that kind
Mm.
of gave me a bit more courage and question marker of hopefully I can continue reusing that if I ever started my own thing again. But yes, I do think it needs. I agree. It's harder if you're like full time. That seems like the boss of the boss of the boss and like things like that.
Yeah.
But I think people are open to this conversation. Obviously, choose your tone, choose your kind of your words carefully. But I do think it makes conversations more productive.
I remember one of the earliest situations when I had like that was I had a lot of self-doubt, and then someone asked me a question. I can't remember the exact context of the question. My instant response was to get really defensive about it because I was frankly insecure.
Of course,
Uh,
we all get insecure when challenged. Let's be clear. Like it's not
yeah,
it's
yeah.
human nature.
And what was interesting, like my manager at the time said, you're being asked this because you are the expert. Like we need to know, and we really want to understand what's going on. So there's not an attack. It's just we understand it. And
Yeah,
you're the guy who knows because that's why
yeah,
you're here. We invited
yeah,
you because you do know. I know this was like not in the moment. It was afterwards, but it was a really interesting sort of transition moment for me of like realizing that the reason that they're asking me that question is because they valued my insight, not because they were smarter and more superior and they
yeah,
were attacking me. Really
yeah.
interesting transition there.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true. And yeah, it's kind of just reminding ourselves that we are those tables and in those rooms because someone chose to have us there, right?
Mm. Yeah,
Like
yeah,
we should
exactly.
not invite you for that conversation, right? So,
Yeah. And this leads into another topic, which, by the way, which is something that I have less experience with because I'm a man. And that's really basically being a woman in these situations. Often, and
yeah.
there's all sorts of ways I can ask these questions, which will go well or will go badly. I'm just going to ask naively. What do you find differently about this? What do you find? Did you find it difficult in these situations, being in relatively male-dominated environments?
I was or completely oblivious to it, or somehow managed to pass through the cracks and was only surrounded by very encouraging men. But then I realized something else is I always considered myself the outsider because I was an immigrant, because I have this Russian, Lebanese, French mix that you barely find anywhere else. And so for me, I was always the odd one out. And somehow the fact that maybe in case it was just my gender and nothing else was something that I just, I'm different. I don't fit in any of those buckets. I'm just going to prove my worth somehow and carry on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's interesting. So I don't know if it has that focusing on other type of my differences just made it easier on me, because I would be like, in my interpretation of it, it was, well, it's fair. I'm different. I'm not born in this country. I don't have the education of this country. I don't have the experiences of this country. So I'm going to have to prove my worth without all of that, and just showing how my difference is a contributor, right? To my value in this specific scenario. And to be honest, it's no surprise that when I got my role at Google, I was offered a role in France or a role in London. And when I asked, well, what's the difference between a PMM in France and a PMM in London? They were like, well, a PMM in France, you'll be focused on the French market. A PMM in London, you'll do international markets. We're considering Russia and like everything, past Germany. I was like, no, I want the London job. Like, I was like, I mean, I'm not French. Sure, I'm French educated and whatever you want, but I'm not French. There'll be other French people way better connected in the French market, knowing way better than me. I felt like I didn't have that much to offer here, but I would have much more to offer in an international role. And this, like, Google does not have much experience in those markets. I have more experience than the average in some of those markets. Like, so that's the way I was going through that. So, that's my very particular experience. And I only came to that realization recently of like, but why did my gender never was so like central and so in some places hurtful to me, I guess. And maybe it has. I'm sure my gender has contributed in places. I just never put it to my gender. I just put it to my immigrant status and all of that. And that was mostly giving me like, fighting wings more than anything else if I felt that it was in the right place. But also, choose your rooms, choose the tables, as much as I value all the women who are the women that are making a change by raising, concerns and calling out wrong behaviors. I do think that there's days to be combative, and there's days where you just need to be in the right room and take the path of least resistance to get to where you need to go. So that's kind of how I balanced it for myself.
Yeah. Do people ever ask you for advice on that? Like other women or other immigrants or people who are sort of like feeling the pressure of their differences? And does that ever come up in your coaching or your consulting conversations or people?
Well, I think definitely not around immigrants. Actually, the conversation is so gender centric at the moment. I feel that everyone limits it to gender, and I think that's why for me it took me several years to be able to like figure out what was going on in my own environment and why I didn't feel that gender became a thing for me or was so strong in my path. I do think that when I speak to ladies who are are considering starting a family or want a family one day, or are interested in tech and really passionate about that, they do ask like how does it work, right, kind of thing. How did you make it work? And no one has the right answers. Like, we all fail every single day, to be honest. In that sense, you find your basis. But again, my path is very particular. I got married quite late. We had Leah quite, in almost in our phase. So I had, 2 decades of like flying through my career, which made, by the way, having children much harder later. So, choose your battle, have them early, right? And let them grow and then speed up, or go as fast as you can and then slow down once you have them. Like, I don't know, slow down if you have kids, but it's a different set. I remember when I first started coming back to work after Leah, I was like, oh my God, like I have half the amount of hours I used to be able to put into work in a day.
Yeah. Because kids don't turn off.
And so you're like, you choose your battles. I never was very patient, but you become even less patient. It's like you really kind of become so much more intentional with your time, because there's only so many hours in the day, and you're going to make sure it's focused on the most impactful things.
Yeah, so a lot of that comes down to prioritization. And this belief about what's right or what you're confident about and so on in
Yeah.
different situations, and being the whole person, so you're a mother and an immigrant and a woman and a marketer
Yeah.
and a leader and a
Well,
investor and a
and
coach
I believe what I
and
say,
consultant.
choose your partners carefully, both at work and at home, right?
It
Because
makes a
it's,
massive
some
difference.
people choose to do it, choose or don't choose, but end up doing it them on their own. But the reality of it is like, yeah, choose your partners, choose your partners at work, choose your partners at home, really carefully. And, you know, I sometimes, especially for those who, call London home, but don't have their family around them, a lot of like, they say it takes a village. I don't have a village. It's really hard.
Yeah,
What I try
yeah,
to remind those people is like, well, to build a village, you need to contribute to the village too. So where, who can you, what mom at like, at nursery can you help to pick up their child and keep them for an extra hour that day because she's going to be late, or she has to like stay late at work, or, or chooses to stay late at work for something important or whatever that is, right? Like, how do you start? It might be really hard on you, but find those pockets of moment where you can actually contribute and help other people, because that's how you're going to build your village back. And I think that's what people underestimate. They're like, well, why
yeah,
do I have to contribute? It can be minor, super minor, but that's how you establish this relationship. And then where you can call up someone saying, can you pick up my child? I'll be at yours in an hour.
yeah. That makes sense. It's interesting. A lot of those things cost us less than they benefit someone else in some sense. Like when you do something, the
Absolutely.
things you're doing cost you less. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. I was
Interesting.
I was speaking to someone actually recently who is actually going through a work transformation, and I was kind of encouraging them to ask for more help, reach out to more of their network for conversations,
Yeah,
insights. And he was telling me, you know what, it's super interesting because this one lady is like literally been saying like, how can I help? Let me introduce you to this. And I was like, he was feeling very kind of uncomfortable to putting her out in that way, is the way he was
yeah.
putting it. And she had to literally tell him, no, you forget, but like in this specific scenario that many years ago, this is what you did for me, and it was like unbelievably helpful. I want to be able to give back. Like, no, I want to do this for you, please let me do this.
Mm,
And that's exactly the point he was making. He was like, I think we forget the impact we have on people when we do
yeah,
something
yeah.
that, you know didn't cost us much and was just a natural thing to do. Yeah, for sure.
So there's a bit of courage in actually doing those things when they are simple, and there's a bit of like courage in accepting the responses. And
Absolutely.
well,
Yeah.
fascinating. I think we've run out of our allocated time.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying the conversation. I'd love to continue, but I think we've run out of our time. So let's we will wrap it up. But before we go, people would like to contact you or like to work with you. What are you doing now? Like, what's your main
Yeah.
thing? Who's your main client? Your ideal customer profile, and how do people get
Yeah.
in contact with you?
Yeah. Yeah. So we touched on the fact that I run three pillars. I'm a board member for startups, mostly B2C marketplace startups. I'm an angel investor, health tech, femtech, and just as a marketer, anything that I have empathy towards, the problem or the audience is really my space. And then as a fractional CMO, typically it's businesses that are at an inflection point of their growth. Typically would be a Series A. It's usually they have found decent product market fit, have now a bit more cash available, and really want to accelerate and would like to avoid all the mistakes in the book and kind of set strong foundations for that growth. So that's really the mix. Marketingcube.co is kind of my little home for everything fractional work. And yeah, that's about me at the moment.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks very much for your time. I really appreciated it. Enjoyed the conversation, Maya. And we've known each other for a long time, and I feel like I've learned new things about you. So that's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having
Yeah.
me, Richard.